Oh, my goodness. The 4 o'clock hour starts off with fireworks. The great Bryce Petty joins us, former Baylor quarterback, back-to-back Big 12 titles. This is such a popular segment. I even have one of the chat rooms. Bryce, good to have you with us. Will you please make sure you tell that Bryce Petty, he was my favorite quarterback ever at Baylor?
I love it. Smokey, always a pleasure being on. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're with me, Craig Smoak, Paul Catalina as well, and we're glad to have you on. It's been a while. It's been too long, and thanks for your time.
I think you should have answered that favorite quarterback ever. Take that, RG3.
Yeah,
that's what you should have said.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Well, the statute doesn't let me say that, so it's okay.
But those 2 Big 12 championships sure do feel pretty good in your pocket, though, don't they?
Man, I tell you what, I never get tired of hearing that. It was a great time, really good team, and man, it was just a lot of good memories.
Bryce Petty with us on Sikkim 365 Radio. What are your thoughts about how you've seen Gerry Bohanon and how he has progressed in a short amount of time, even though he's been on campus for quite some time?
Man, I tell you, it doesn't matter if you're on campus for 2 years or 10 years, like I was. When you see to your point, the progression of just becoming a true quarterback, and I think that we all kind of talked about it before, but I think he came in, he was getting recruited as a tight end, and he wanted to play quarterback. And when he did come in, you could see it was more athletic in nature than a true QB. And just what he's done, I think it's just hats off to Coach Bell and that offensive staff, and he's truly blossoming into a really, really good quarterback. And so I love watching his progression, because you just don't see kids develop anymore in college. And so it's a lot of fun watching him.
You guys were on the front end of the transfer portal, where you could have, but you had to sit out, and you were one who stayed a long time. You just mentioned it. Gerry Bohanon stayed a long time. Is this maybe, it's going to be hard because kids, if they don't play, want to leave, but is this maybe a testament to what can happen if you do stay in a place and grow as a player?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I've always answered this question really with a precursor that look, everybody has a different situation at hand that presents in terms of, do you transfer or do you not? But what's interesting, what I've always said is, man, life doesn't allow you to transfer. So, once you get done with football, the opportunity given to you to put colors over the shoulder pads and represent a school that chose you and that you chose them when you were 18, there's just something to be said about staying put, and there's something to be said about working hard. And I think nowadays, like I said, every situation is different, but I just think nowadays we're kind of creating this culture of, hey, if it doesn't work, go somewhere else. And that's not going to be good when, you lose a job, or, when things in your marriage don't work out, or, parenting's tough. And, it doesn't, to me, like I said, there's different situations, but to me, to the kids that do truly stay put and work their butt off and allow, as I've always said, the good Lord to tell you when it's time, and you get to reap the benefits. And I think that's what, Gerry's doing. And you can see as the guys around him, every time he does well, and even at times that he struggles, which hasn't been much this year, guys, by the pins, come up to him, slap him on the butt, say, hey man, we're going to go get this next one. And so you just get to see the rapport and the leadership that he's done in his tenure there, and be able to lead those guys, and it comes back. So I'm just really proud of him for sticking to it, and love that, the results are there with him.
Bryce, sticking with that offense, I mean, a big part of Gerry's success and just the offense as a whole has been the change in scheme with Jeff Grimes, the RVO wide zone. I mean, the O-line looks night and day from last year. Running game, obviously, is dramatically different, and there's Gerry as well. What are your thoughts on the wide zone and what Jeff Grimes has done, in a very short amount of time?
Yeah, well, I think it definitely speaks to, 2020 was tough on a lot of people, especially in a culture of a locker room trying to understand and get accustomed to a new coach and new styles. And then with, Coach Grimes and what he's doing this year, you can really see the guys buy in. And I think that's a huge testament to the kids, but I think also the coaching staff of knowing what your identity is. I think we knew as fans, and maybe as a coaching staff in that locker room even before we did. But I think that we established our identity really early, which is, a lot of times where you see guys struggle, teams struggle, is when they don't know who they are. And I think we've always been a team sticking to the run behind Abram Smith and Tristan Ebner, and that's just done really well for us. And it's allowed Gerry as well to be able to take what the defense gives them, not have to force things. We don't get off schedule in terms of being down in the chains versus second down, and we're moving the ball. So I love the change. And again, man, anytime you get it behind 7. I think good things are going to happen.
Yeah, and they just seem to be – it just looks like a football team. There were times, obviously, last year, for a lot of reasons, it wasn't the case. Hey, I got to bring this up because when Baylor played at Oklahoma State, I brought up there's a kind of a force field inside the red zone at Oklahoma, and you responded to that. How can you have a great sense of humor because that was such a moment, man. Golly, when you tripped.
Yeah, well, I think you have to have a sense of humor in this game. As much as I do have a sense of humor, like it's after that game, it was a lot of sleepless nights because it just not that it was a turning point. It was so early in the game. I mean, hell, it was our first drive, but you saw what happened after, and so I just felt like it was one of those things. Now I can look back and laugh because if you don't, everybody else is, so you might as well join. But at the same time, it was tough. It was not something that I was appreciative of for Gundy's mullet to be left on the field like that. So.
Bryce, there are games, though, and that's one of those places that they kind of happen where, and I think Baylor experienced it early in the year when they lost in Stillwater, that the first time you go in there or you're trying to play and they're good and they're smacking those paddles on the wall, it was
so cold that day too.
Cold, like there was
Thank you.
Yeah. There was nothing set up. Yeah, it was Craig. There was nothing set up for you guys to go right. It was just, it's like the football gods were like, not today, guys. It's not your day.
Yeah, well, I mean, shoot, man, we were both playing in it, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they put up 40 points on us and we didn't, and then that doesn't matter. I mean, football is football, and we just saw it last night, and what I've never heard of is a river. What do they call it? An atmospheric river. I don't know if y'all ever heard of that term, but the Sunday night game was an atmospheric river. So, anyways, like ball is played whenever, and when you got the whistle blown, you got to put out your best stuff. So, but I do think it teaches you a lot, and to be able to get through adversity, and even on that, first drive, had the trip and then the fumble and then the fumble snap. So it was just boom, 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 and you got to be able to adjust and get back to the fundamentals and what and you got to be Baylor, and that's what we were always taught, and we preached to ourselves is be Baylor because that's the only thing you can control. And but again, when you do get smacked in the face, you got to be able to respond, and we just didn't that day.
Bryce, you mentioned 7, Abram Smith. What are your thoughts on what you've seen from him? I mean, he's well on his way to 1,000 yards. He seems to be a perfect fit for this wide zone, run straight ahead offense. And was playing linebacker last year. Not that he didn't have experience at running back, but he did have to make the move back to offense. What are your thoughts on 7, as you said?
Yeah, man, I love him, and I think that he needs to get about 25 touches a game. To me, just in terms of what he brings to the team, when he breaks off big runs, when he gets first downs, when he makes positive plays, you can just see the energy of the sideline pick up with him. And I think it was Dylan Doyle that said last week after the game, something that was just really powerful and impactful about him as a person. That if anybody is as a teammate, anyways, has a quote that says you embody what Baylor football is supposed to be, what it is. Man, that is. As a fan that sits back and isn't in there all day, every day with the guys, that just tells me a lot about who he is and what the team believes about him and believes in him. And so I just love the switch. I love his again, just one, the mentality to say, okay, let's do it and be a team player, but then 2, to just have the athletic ability to go do it and do it in the way that he does is I'm a huge fan.
Bryce, what does it say about your alma mater that they have had to go through a couple of complete renovation, changes in the coaching staff? We know what Jim Grobe did in 2016. with that staff that was on their last leg. And then they bring in Matt Rule, and he turns them around, and then they go 2-7 because of a lot of reasons. But now here they are, 6-1. What does it say about Baylor football, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned it to the guys too, but last year, the year before. But just resiliency is something that you can't just learn about; you have to go through. That's one of those things that again sets you up in life. And I always love to talk about ball and what it's done in life for me, just because I learned so much about myself through it. Whether it was the waiting or actually getting to play and go on to the NFL and play was a tremendous learning experience as well. But this team and what they've done, since coach left, is just, it's been nothing but uphill. And it, for those guys to say that they wore the colors and run out of that tunnel as a Baylor Bear, they ought to hold their head, pretty dang high, because there's a lot of things stacked up against you. And, to be able to come out on top and again, not only just go out there, but dominate. I mean, they are dominating this year, which is just, it's so much fun to watch. It's incredible, the story. And I hope that, 30 for 30 or E60 does something on these kids, just because it's just been a really cool, and tough fought, couple of years for the guys, but they definitely stuck through it. You can just tell that it's just bonded them in a way that, it's probably hard to put words to.
Bryce, before we get into the game this weekend, I was curious your thoughts on the Big 12 race right now with the two Oklahoma schools. Obviously, the Cowboys just took their first loss. OU eked by, but you got Iowa State starting to pick up some energy as well. And then, of course, there's Baylor. And then, Texas, they win this weekend. They could, find a route back in there. But what are your thoughts on the Big 12 landscape at the moment?
Yeah, what's really interesting is actually I just kind of tweeted out that, for Trevor and I's podcast, it's definitely something that I'm pretty excited to talk about, because I think obviously at the beginning of the year it was OU or Iowa State and really OU's to lose. And we just seen a struggle bus from week one. We're talking about identity, that Baylor found ours really early. I just don't know if they found theirs yet, especially with a defense that was supposed to be coming in and be, Alex Grinch's best defense. And that has proven to be just a, utter disappointment probably for them. But what is interesting is you do have this Baylor, OU, Oklahoma State, and honestly, what could be Iowa State come back in there to come back in the picture, and same thing as Texas. So it's been really interesting, and we even had Greg McElroy on at the I guess preseason show, and it was OU, Iowa State, and then everybody else was way below, and now you kind of see this race to the top. So I'm really interested in terms of schedule. To me, Iowa State's got a juggernaut to go through. That one's going to be really tough to get through. I think our schedule sets up best for us to basically control our own destiny. I think we take care of business this week and next week, because there's really not and if you guys have noticed too, it's kind of any given Saturday. I mean, I don't know who's going to show up. You just have teams that TCU sometimes shows up and sometimes they don't. Tech, West Virginia, same thing. K-State is another one that they came out firing against Stanford. So I really think it sets up best for us and going to be, a heck of a showdown, in a couple weeks when they come to town on the 13th. So I love Baylor to make a run, as long as we can, again, have some things go our way. Oklahoma State, take another stumble would be awesome. I don't want to see this Bedlam game, be the Big 12 championship, contender again. So I really like Baylor's chances. I think they're coming on strong.
Can we, when Baylor, if in fact the game with Oklahoma has as much meaning as it could, can we just replay your presser that week?
Shoot, can we replay the game?
Yeah. Man, I tell you what, it'll be. I can't wait, man. And I hope they put their heads down, because there is nothing that OU has shown me, to date that makes them, this indefensible juggernaut. They've got holes, more than a pegboard, I feel like. So I think that, again, if we handle our business, I think it's going to be the best defense that Caleb Williams has seen to this point. And it'll be interesting to see what they do. I don't think there's going to be a 4th and 1 run to change the game for them. So he's definitely added a different dynamic than what Spencer Rattler gave him. He's got legs, and I think that Coach Riley loves when his guys can run. But at the same time, too, if you make those guys one-dimensional and you take out Kennedy Brooks, they just don't do as well when Kennedy Brooks isn't in the game. And then their defense again is a whole other story. They're kind of Jekyll and Hyde up front. We saw them in the Red River Showdown, shootout, rivalry, whatever it's called. That their defense up front can be vicious, and then we've also seen it like this Kansas game where they're 6 yards back and they're the linebackers left. So it's just I think it sets up well for us. I really do.
An Oklahoma State fan on the chat room at Blake 50785. Boo Bryce. He's an Oklahoma State fan. Hey, you're doing this podcast now. You mentioned that, and it's kind of, you look relaxed, you enjoy it. You've got some great personalities, former players on it as well. How much fun has that been?
I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. It's been a lot of fun, and honestly, Trevor and I were talking about it probably 2 years ago to do it, and then we were like, man, I don't want to spend money on all the equipment. But we got picked up by Bet Rivers, which has been a lot of fun, and then it's really got me back into the game to where I loved being a fan for a couple years, but then actually watching it, and then having to tell my wife like, hey, Saturdays, babe, I'm sorry, but it's football, and I've got my TV going, my laptop, my phone, watching all the games. It's just been really, really fun on this side to kind of take I was a player and now I get to talk about it, has just been a lot of fun. So, I think we do gel pretty well. Trevor's definitely the looks of the podcast, and I'm kind of more of I think I bring a little bit better credit, and personality. No, I'm kidding. I'm not kidding about the look, but the credit, I think he actually has a better credit score than I do too. So, but anyways, yeah, it's just been a lot of fun. So good time. Do
you ever just subtly remind him of what happened on October?
He got hurt that year.
2014. I remember.
Yeah, it's true. It's such a sore subject because he did. He met Sean Oakman in a wrong way, and but it's been a lot of fun to be able to have the green and gold in our kind of a podcast studio. He doesn't get to say anything, and then we're just bashing on OU every day, every time we get in there. So that's always fun too. So, but I will remind him every now and then, and just let him know. It's just that he knows the look. I just have the look of like, hey, I beat you twice.
Bryce, I wish I could find. I would send it to you if I ever do. The raw video that press conference. David and Craig went to cover you guys, and I said, I've got to go hear what Bob Stoops has to say, because Angry Bob Stoops is hilarious. I mean, it's absolutely hilarious, because he's not a really bombastic guy, but like he gets really annoyed, with questions, and the Oklahoma media,
especially after a loss,
could not wrap their head around the fact that they'd lost to Baylor this many times over this stretch, 2011, 2013, all these times. And so they just kept, well, what's going on? And he's like, that's a good team out there. That's a good team. Yeah. They're really good. They're going to win the Big 12 again. I don't know what you guys are asking me. And it was a wonderful meltdown that I wish I would have had the raw video too, just to look at when I'm sad.
Yeah, well, we can always play that. I think everybody knows my presser. It's 3 words, so I think it'd be great to just play his over and over in the locker room and around campus would be great.
Well, you guys had the great win in Austin too that time.
Yeah. Shoot, it took us a while to get going. Yeah. Thanks to me, but we did, and that was again kind of getting fired up on this scrubby little Baylor thing. Yeah. And then, they had their linebacker that, again, it's been really interesting to see just kind of the world of college football. And actually we're seeing the ACC, which is just funny. It might be something that comes up on our podcast tonight, but I mean, as it stands today, and not to take away from what we're talking about, but this is just crazy to me that the ACC championship game in Charlotte would be against Wake Forest and Pitt.
Yeah,
that's just a weird world. And we were able to kind of see it as we were coming up, that it wasn't just this, we obviously 7 or I guess 6 back-to-back with OU, but at that time, if Texas slapped a letter on your desk, it was like, man, I can't believe I just got, an offer to Texas. And then, I'd say part like Griff changed that, and guys, and then, all of a sudden A&M goes to the SEC. And so Texas just doesn't have this like overarching cloud over Texas as a whole recruiting wise. And it really changed the scope. So it was just great to be a part of that. And then, the meltdown with Stoops, and again, OU and Texas, it doesn't matter, man. You got to come out and play us just like we got to play you.
How little did we know that Mac Brown's decision to recruit RG3 as a DB would lead to so many different things over the next few years. But Bryce, I do want to ask you about Texas in particular. Was there any extra juice when you saw those guys coming up on the schedule? I mean, any different versus playing anybody else? And do you think that the fact that they're a little bit down, the leaving for the SEC in a few years, do you think that plays into providing a little extra ammunition at all this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it should. It should, right? I mean, that's something that, again, at that time, especially when we played, if you didn't get offered by Texas, it was for a reason. I mean, hell, they offered everybody, right? So there was definitely a chip on our shoulder then, and they tried as much as they could to keep that whole, like, we're Texas thing going on. And then, you get on the field and they're like, dude, this ain't Texas of old anymore. We don't care. And so, but especially them leaving to the SEC is, and the way that they did it too, I think is just kind of a slap in the face to, the entire conference. So, I hope that for, every team that plays, them or OU, that there's, they're going to leave with, without their lunch money.
I asked this question. I've done it a couple of different times when we've discussed the transfer portal, and I always wondered about, had it been available back during those days when you had to remain patient. You answered that for us. We appreciate it. It doesn't surprise me the way you felt it either.
You know what also wasn't available? NIL. That would have been good for Bryce.
Bryce would have, yeah.
That's it.
You would have made.
That's it.
Yeah.
I tell you what, Smokey, I would have said, hey, man, I'll come on your show, but, I'm going to need a few zeros behind that one. But, no, I tell you what, it's interesting now because you I mean, shoot, I don't know what's going to happen with Mr. Dr. Pepper at Clemson. But you got at least an NIL for the marketing purposes. You had DJ Ungalawehele, and then you had Spencer Rattler, and then this cat from Southlake up here at Quinn Ewers, who's fourth on the depth chart. Those were like the three dudes in football that were, it was like million. And two of those guys are, well, one's benched, one's probably about to be. And then you got, Quinn Ewers, who, is sitting behind C.J. Stroud, who's a pretty talented freshman in of itself. So I don't know what's going to happen with this NIL. I know if I own, my own car dealership or, ESPN radio, I ain't dishing out nothing until I know,
right.
That you're the juice is worth the squeeze there. But that's just me. So I think that it's interesting the way how it came out. It was just this Wild West, thing that, I mean, we've been talking about it for years. I feel like at NCAA, they finally approve it, let it happen. And then it's just like, hey, everybody for themselves. And, because don't get me wrong, I love the fact that, because I've seen a lot of things in the locker room where, even stipends from our stuff are going, back to families. So I think it's a beautiful way to be able to compensate kids for, their ability to play football. I just think that, I felt like there needed to be a little bit of some parameters around how crazy it got because of, the situation they're about to find. Now, I don't know if that affects it moving forward. It probably doesn't, but just interesting how it rolled out.
By the way, there's a text from Diane. I listened to Trevor and Bryce pod. I love it. Great chemistry between the two. My favorite is when Bryce asked Trevor what it was like to be booed by 85,000 fans.
See, I get my nudges. Every now and then.
Surprising,
Got to.
Yeah. You always you had them in you, man. We appreciate it. It's great. Love covering you when you were here, and also great to have you on whenever we can. Good luck with going forward with the podcast and whatever else as well, man. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys very much. I appreciate the time as always.
Oh, he was just incredible.
But by the way, if he could have asked the old place we worked for a few zeros, we could have guaranteed him at least 1 0, and it might have been at the front.
Yeah, like
no,
a
it
dollar
would have
sign
been
and a zero. He was unbelievable to cover.
Yeah, he was a great player, and he was a quotable guy at all times. I mean, ready for OU is something that probably no one outside of Baylor, fandom knows what that's about. But if you are a Baylor fan or you covered them during that year, then you know exactly what ready for OU means and what that ended up meaning, a week later. But I will disagree. I do need to disagree with Bryce on one thing. He mentioned Iowa State's schedule, and I think there's a couple of teams just off the top of my head who have more difficult schedules, Big 12-wise, moving forward. Iowa State's starting to play really well right now, and they could very well find themselves in the championship game depending on what happens. But at West Virginia, to me, that should be a win, right? I mean, Iowa State at West Virginia. Home versus Texas should be a win.
Yeah.
At Texas Tech should be a win. Then it's at number 4 OU. So that one's a little more in the air. And then home versus TCU. That's 4-1 to me. Like if they just handle their business. Whereas if you look at there's two schedules.
OU's got 3 ranked teams coming up. Quick.
If you look at two different schedules. Oklahoma's got Tech coming up this weekend, which will be a game that they should handle. But then they've got at number 16 Baylor, home versus 22 Iowa State, and then at number 15 Oklahoma State to close out. That's 3 weeks to close out. 3 weeks in a row. They play those games, and then Texas Tech. I wanted to mention their schedule as the rest of the way as they fired their head coach today. But this is kind of brutal for Sonny Cumbie. At number 4 OU, home versus 22 Iowa State, home versus 15 Oklahoma State, on the road against 16 Baylor. So their 4 remaining games are all top 25 games for Sonny Cumbie and the Red Raiders. So I'd say those schedules are a little bit more difficult.
And maybe why you make the change when you do, just because
you know what's coming.
You know what's coming, and you know you're going to have to move on, and or probably.
All right, we'll come back. Ricky Thompson, former Baylor wide receiver, also played with then what was the Washington Redskins. He'll join us, Baylor sideline for Baylor Radio. His thoughts about the off week and now getting into this week with